Hi everyone, I hope everyone's doing really well today. And on today's segment, we're going to be talking about addiction, trauma, self-esteem, relationships, and the family system. And this has been a huge obstacle in my life. And fortunately, I've been clean and sober now for over a year and a half. And I work with a professional counsellor. And we talk about all these issues to do with self-esteem and addiction. And it's been a massive asset in my life. And it's taken a long time to get to this point where I'm at now. And I'm continually trying to put the work in every day. So towards the end of the video, I'm going to give you some tips on selecting a counsellor and what, if I recommend getting a counsellor or not. And before we do that, I want to talk about the definition of addiction. And, what I recommend people do after this video is actually look at multiple definitions of addiction and find something that means something to them that they can relate to. And most importantly, something that's going to inspire you to want to take action with your own addictions to find some form of recovery and healing from. So in terms of the present day definition of addiction, this is just my definition. By all means, you can use it or you can find your own. And then what I'm going to do is talk about the etymology of the word addiction. So in terms of the present day definition, this is one I use. The way I define it is basically any kind of persistent compulsion towards some kind of self-destructive habit, whether that be towards a thought, activity, person, place, or behavior that has damaging consequences on my self-esteem and my life as a whole, and it's something that I find very difficult to regulate and control. So that's just mine. There's obviously multiple definitions, and goes without saying that there can be some form of chronic dependency on something, whether it be, like I said, a thought, behavior, action, activity, place, whatever it is that you find difficult to regulate. So in terms of the etymology of this word, the grassroots definition of it has a very interesting meaning behind it. It comes from an actual medieval Latin word, which is addictus. And this word, the phrase, all roads lead to Rome, it actually comes from Roman law. An addiction in Roman law was basically someone who was enslaved to a master to repay off accumulated debts. And I remember reading that and I was thinking, what a amazing metaphor for addiction. The amount of times I felt like something had dominion over me and that I felt powerless, and something was essentially my master and I was its slave. Now, if that's too shaming for you, by all means, use, like I said, find your own definition, what works for yourself. But I thought that was a very interesting analogy myself. So now that we've defined addiction, we have to now look at how we're going to get help. How we're going to begin healing these wounds. And it goes without saying, I think the training for addiction is abuse. And one of the more prominent forms of abuse, I would say, obviously it goes without saying there's so many different variations of abuse, but, emotional neglect is just as damaging as physical violence sometimes. It has the same effects, if not sometimes worse. There's nothing worse than having a parent there who's there, but they're not there, if that makes any sense. They're there, but they're not there. And just as much if you don't have any parents, or if you have one parent, it can be very, very challenging. And I find in, more healthier family systems, and now, it goes without saying there's no such thing as a perfect family, and, there is such a thing as good enough parenting, where, there's supportive love, and there's firm boundaries being set, nothing's too rigid, everything's relatively flexible in the system. And the main thing I would say is that one of the big differences is the children are allowed to be themselves. To some degree, obviously, like I said, there's firm boundaries still, and there's supportive love. The parents have a form of independence individually, and they can come together and have interdependence. They have that element of autonomy and interdependence. It's having both, and it's very difficult. Obviously, it goes without saying, me working through my own issues, I see how difficult this is, to be so healthy like that. And I would say in a dysfunctional family, now, like I said, there's varying degrees in every family of dysfunction, but if in a highly dysfunctional family, a very chronically inducing, stressful family system, I would say the children are fixed into some kind of adaptive child role. They're not allowed to be themselves. They're adapting to the stress of the family system. It's kind of this kind of homeostasis in the family unit, where now, rather than the child being themselves, they're having to now adapt to the stress of the parents. And, this isn't to blame anyone's parents by any means of the word. It's really just, we all have varying degrees of this, and it's just trying to get to the root cause of it. And, some of the common, very common adaptive child roles, we have the one I relate to most was the caretaker, an emotional caretaker. You're trying to take care of now the parent. We often think with codependency, we think of this needy a needy child on a parent or something like that. But oftentimes what I see is rather than, the parent taking care of the child in a way is actually taking care of the parent. So the child's providing the emotional needs to the parent so they can get their physical needs met. So in terms of the childhood roles, we have the caretaker, we have the scapegoat, the person that the family abuses to take out all the anger in the family system. It could be a passive role, someone who just takes all the abuse, they've never been taught about boundaries in their family system. Or it could be a more active scapegoat, where they're kind of a rebel. They're acting out all the family's pain. They're acting out all the rage of the family, and that's the way they get attention, whether it be positive or negative or not. You could be the academic. You could be the superstar hero child. You could be the massive performing athlete, and that's the way you got your that narcissistic supply when you were younger. That's the way you got attention. By performing, you become a human doing, not a human being. And there's a variety of different roles. The perfectionist, the academic. That's the way you got good grades, and that's how you got attention. But now you have like this chronic maladaptive perfectionism where you find it very difficult now not to make a mistake, and you feel so ashamed if you do. So there's all these roles, and they're endless. But the main premise of what I'm trying to get behind now is that you've had to adapt to a high level of stress when you were very young. You've not had maybe someone protect you or someone love you for who you are. So now in your adulthood, you're carrying all this pain, and you have a false self. And I would say with healing, it's this journey back to the self. It's getting back in touch with that core relationship that you didn't have when you were younger, but now, you have to look at, I look at family systems, it's kind of like this legacy of abuse. All these really, very painful identities are kind of passed down from generation to generation. These behaviors are passed down from generation to generation. But, this legacy of abuse doesn't need to continue. The cool thing I think about healing, this is the way I look at it, because it has this multi-generational effect. That this pain gets passed down from father to son, or from mother to daughter, or from mother and father to son, or whatever it is. This pain gets passed through generations. But if the wounded child heals, they actually now break the cycle. And they can actually now, if they get healthy, and if they start taking care of themselves, developing that sense of self, where they start developing boundaries and esteeming themselves, working on their goals, they can actually pass now this valuable asset of their own esteem now onto their own children. And it has this positive cascading effect on the other families moving forward. So it's a massive, massive thing, healing. It isn't just about yourself, even though that is so important. It's so important to take care of yourself. But it has this, again, even though, like I said, there's this legacy abuse, it has this positive multi-generational effect as well. So I definitely recommend everyone, get your healing on, work on your self-esteem, work on your relationships, and most importantly, work on that core relationship with yourself. Start rebuilding that self-esteem, taking care of yourself, letting go of the addictions. Even the more culturally normalized addictions, like for myself, I had a huge issue with my phone. I'm on it 10 hours a day. Crazy amount of time, over like a full-time job, over a full-time hours on my phone per week. And now I've got it down to about 2.5 to 1.5. And I had a day recently, which I've not had in years, where I've not gone on my phone for an entire day, which was a huge thing for me. But, the culturally normalized addictions, like drinking, smoking, and phone addiction. And, it goes without saying that the core of it is probably some form of codependency and some form of, the addictive behaviors that it's like the pre-verbal behaviors that you gained, approval from your parents. And that kind of manifested probably later on, possibly some kind of substance abuse or something to that effect. So the last little segment I wanted to talk about was selecting a therapist, and if I recommend a therapist. Now, I've had my fair share of therapists, and I've done a lot of group therapy work. And what I would say is, for someone who's been in a very disruptive household, have had very neglectful parenting styles or authoritarian parent styles, what I would say is that the first thing is, even if it's basic talk therapy and you're just talking to someone, the beneficial thing about it is, say if you have a lot of shame and a lot of anxiety, by talking to someone and you've never had that opportunity before, never had that interpersonal connection with someone that you can talk to about all your issues in a safe manner, and just have someone just listen and validate that experience. That is a huge, huge thing, and that will alleviate a lot of the anxiety, the social anxiety and the shame. Excuse me. And so to have that therapist, even if it is just basic talk therapy, is a massive thing. Now, in terms of, do I recommend doing that long term, years on end? Nothing ever changes, but you talk. I don't necessarily recommend that, but like I said, it's good for alleviating social anxiety. It's good for alleviating shame. If you're telling all your secrets that you're ashamed of to someone who's not going to judge you and just validate your experiences. I need to sneeze again. Sorry. And they're just going to validate your experiences, then I highly recommend getting some kind of therapist, even if it is just the basic talk therapy. Now, the problem with this is that what I find is, and the roadblock I came into is that there's only so much talking can do, and you have to do other things as well. You need the coping strategies. You need to work on the mindset shifts. You need to work on the behavior change as well, because what ended up happening is, as I got older, coming into my 30s, the kind of substance abuse for myself was becoming higher, and I noticed my levels of addictiveness was getting higher. So you need to have that element of coping skills and grieving, and you need a trained professional to help you do that. And you also need to have them, set goals. You are monitoring the addictions, even the culturally normalized addictions, like I said, like phone addiction for me, to help you now subside these and grieve out that pain. And it's very difficult to find a therapist, I've noticed, that does all of this. And you might need to find someone who specializes in addiction or codependency. Codependency is an addiction in itself. It's probably the largest addiction in the world, according to my therapist. And also it's probably the most hidden. That lack of self and the all the behaviors that come with that. I recommend looking into codependency if you don't know what that term is. It's I don't want to say disease, but I want to say it is a condition of the developing self. You're not allowed to have yourself, your identity. So you've had to gain all these behaviors to try and get approval and esteem from other people. And now it comes to trying to esteem yourself and letting go and grieving this pain that you've been carrying. So I would recommend, just kind of touching on the therapist side of it, finding someone who's highly specialised in codependency and addiction specifically, and if you can, if it's a therapist who's specialised in the addiction that you have, then try and find someone as well, if you can have a consultation with them, that you get good vibes off, you feel as though that understands you and your needs and the issues that you have. Because that's only going to bring a more harmonious relationship in the end, and better healing and more deeper healing. The final little thing I would say on choosing a therapist is if you've had a highly, highly toxic or very damaging relationship, say with your mother, then I would try and get a female therapist. Someone that you can rebuild that positive relationship from, daughter to mother, female to female or male to male, Or if you've had a highly, highly damaging relationship with your father, I would try and get a male therapist. And then you have that positive reference experience of someone that you can trust, who's male. Or if it's a damaging relationship with your mother, then by getting a female therapist, you can rebuild that interpersonal bridge with someone who's a female, and it alleviates that negative association. So that's what I would recommend, and that's just like the starting point. I've really wanted to do this video for a long time, and I hope you guys have found some benefits out of it. Please share it if you can, if you feel as though someone needs to listen to this. The biggest take-home message is from this: find your own definition of addiction, and look into working with a professional if you can. Another thing just before we go is that I would recommend, if you can't afford a therapist or a highly specialised therapist, is try and get involved with some kind of group therapy work, which is, the AA meetings or the codependency meetings are usually free, that you can go free of charge, and that rebuilds that interpersonal bridge with other people. And you probably realise your social anxiety, even though it would be very scary at first, by just going and saying how you feel, and just people saying thank you for sharing, that will validate the experience, and it will alleviate the shame and anxiety and the guilt, whatever the emotion is. So there's always something, but I understand, there's massive waiting lists. If you go for like an NHS, counsellor, sometimes there's a massive waiting list. So I recommend, if you can, get in a highly specialised one, and if not, trying to do some free group therapy work, because it's still very beneficial. Obviously, you're not going to have as much time to speak as if you have a one-on-one counsellor, but it's still something. And by doing that, either getting a counsellor or doing group therapy, it raises your self-esteem, because you're taking care of yourself. You're saying, I value me now. This is about my life. This is about me and getting my healing on, having high self-esteem. And by demoing it live to yourself in real time, that I can take care of myself by getting a therapist or a counsellor, or doing the group therapy work, that's showing that I care about myself, and your self-esteem will go up. So that can help manage your addictions as well. You won't need to kind of self-medicate and act it out, because you have that esteem inbuilt now into yourself. So I hope you guys have enjoyed that video. I've really enjoyed speaking about this issue, and hope to speak to you guys soon, and have a lovely day. Bye bye.